Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And welcome to this podcast in which we are going to cover a very interesting topic that is related to ESG, environmental social governance aspects. And nowadays, you can see every technical and non-technical person related to environment is speaking about this common acronym and what it stands for, how it's basically practically implemented in various parts of the world, and is it really going to make sense or bring out the impacts what people are envisaging. So in order to answer all those questions, we have with our guest today, Mr. Asad Mehmood, who is the co-founder and managing partner of IFRS Lab. Welcome, sir. And before going to our speaker for today, let me introduce him as well. And although he has too many credentials, which could be discussed, and but I be going to be very crisp. And while during the discussion, we'll be having different views from this eminent expert, and we'll see that how he has brought an impact in different sectors, not only in Pakistan, but across the globe. So Mr. Asad Mehmood is basically the visionary leader with over 20 years of experience in energy efficiency, sustainable business practices, and change management. And he has brought significant actionable impacts on global platform in terms of policies and regulations and standardization of different activities. So cutting the long story short, at IFRS Lab, Mr. Asad leverages his extensive experience to steer the firm in providing premier ESG advisory and consulting services, ensuring that the clients achieve sustainable and impactful results. So I hope I have done justice with the introduction part. So now let's listen more about ESG aspects from our speaker, and how from their platform IFRS Lab they are going to cater, and what was the point of origination in bringing this platform. So over to you, Usman Saab. Just tell us, our audience, about this IFRS Lab, and what was the thinking and the point of origination this came about in your mind.
Asad Saab, thank you very much for inviting me to this podcast, and thank you very much for this sterling introduction. I feel honored to be here as a guest in your podcast.
Thank you.
So in terms of IFRS Lab, we have been operating in the UK for last 13 years with a sister company called Efficient Concepts, whereby, we have been delivering the ESOS, which is Energy Savings Opportunity Scheme. We've been delivering audits on that and trainings.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, I have been delivering trainings myself in the energy sector, on the energy efficiency sector, because in the UK we have to produce energy performance certificates for every domestic or commercial property if it goes on the market for sale or rent. So that is where we started this whole journey of, ESOS. At that time, it was known as CSR, corporate social responsibility. And then, I felt, that there was a gap in the market, especially in the GCC and the South Asian market, because ESG, whether we like it or not, is an honest truth, which is going to be a binding force in relation to our future generations, and the businesses and the planet where we are living. So I felt that, there was a need for, this platform where, we can look at ESG in relation to the audits, the compliance, reporting, and then eventually, hand-holding for various different businesses to ensure that, when we come back after the 12 months, they have adequate knowledge, experience and training in terms of ESG. So IFRS Lab came into being about 2 years ago, and we are trying to do ESG service within the GCC and the Pakistan market.
Well, it's very heartening to know about like the journey, and I think you have covered a lot of like milestones within last 2 years, and congratulations for
Thank
that.
you.
And hopefully, like we are going to see upcoming activities in different sectors of the economy soon. So this
Definitely.
brings to me another question, I think, which is very pertinent to be put up in front of you. That what is to you the current ESG compliance landscape if we look into Pakistan, and what's common and unique in different countries context when you talk about GCC, or even you talk about European countries as well. So how do you look at those things? We definitely know that in some parts of the world compliance is coming up and has already been there, and how you like look into these things and the pace at which this is coming up.
In terms of the various different landscapes, in terms of the region, and like you rightly said in the introduction, that ESG is no longer a buzzword. So I will start off with Pakistan. Pakistan, if you look at SECP, the Security and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, is moving leaps and bounds in terms of ESG compliance, the awareness, and so on and so forth. I mean, the amount of activity that I have seen in the last 6 months by SCCP just on ESG alone is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, we have done a webinar in which you and I were involved, and we had the a senior person from SCCP involved in that webinar. So there are two things that come out of that. One, there is a regulator present in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Two, that regulator has the appetite to move things forward. So that is the second thing. And that second thing is the most important thing, because you have to look at it from the point of view that, look, larger corporations, limited companies, LLCs, whether they're in Pakistan or in GCC or in Europe, they will fall under that remit at one point or another. Okay. What about the SMEs? So, now in Pakistan, SECP is paving way for those SMEs to make sure that, they come under that umbrella. And ultimately, ESG is not just another audit. It's not just another tick box exercise. Once we go into the depth of that ESG, people will understand that ESG is not just about compliance, it's not just about auditing, and as the acronym suggests, environment. So we talk about environment, the carbon emissions and offsets and efficiencies and so on and so forth. The second part, which is the social part, so if you dissect that social part, there are so many different aspects of your social life within the workplace involved in that.
Definitely.
And then when you look at the G of that ESG, which is the governance part, again, once you dissect it, I mean, I don't think this podcast it can be long enough for us to dissect all those three segments.
Yeah.
But they run parallel to our personal lives as well, all these three segments, and the business as well. So it is very important for us to understand the ESG, how it works, what it will do, and how the businesses will benefit. So, like I said, in relation to the question, Pakistan is doing a great job in that. Now, let's look at the GCC countries, so in some countries, it is mandatory now. So countries like Bahrain, Oman, ESG reporting is mandatory, But what we need to understand is in those countries it's mandatory, but in other GCC countries it isn't mandatory at the moment. So the question we need to ask ourselves, why? Okay. And the reason to that is lack of capacity.
Yeah.
So in both terms, so capacity building in terms of understanding, and capacity building also in terms of people who can deliver those audits, those compliance, and so on and so forth. So at the moment, all those countries are taking baby steps to get individuals certified, qualified, businesses, attending various different seminars, webinars, and so on and so forth, to get a better understanding of ESG. So like you rightly said, ESG is not just a buzzword anymore. Countries, and a country like Pakistan, which falls under the developing category, so it is still, focused on the ESG. The Security and Exchange Commission of Pakistan is focused on that, which is a great thing, and I really enjoy seeing all the effort that SECP is putting in the compliance and the advancement of ESG.
Well, definitely, when the regulator, in fact, start looking into different aspects, then it seems like the things are becoming easy. But there are definitely different stakeholders within the value chain which focus on different segments of ESG, as you have defined each and every term separately. So when we talk about the regulatory landscape, and while appreciating the SECP role and other stakeholders which are trying to sensitize the market, as our consortium is looking into, you're taking the lead as well on that, on those endeavors, your platform, and there are other platforms like PISG, NIBAF, SBP, and other commercial banks, and everyone is looking into this sort of looking forward to make ESG the part of their annual reporting requirements. So there are two things when we look into this perspective. One is the carrot approach and one is the stick approach. So what are the globally or on regional level in GCC as well, the present scenario of the frameworks or the regulations that revolve around ESG compliance. So is there any timeline for it, or any specific criteria or where certain industries have to comply and certain industries may get some timeline to further adopt it as per their existing economic aspects or other aspects as well? So what are those regulatory aspects or regulatory frameworks which are evolving around ESG, developing in that ecosystem which is required to really ensure the compliance?
So in terms of the regulatory frameworks, as we know, we have GRI, SASB, IFRS S1, S2, S3, S9, S19, all of those standards are there. So they have been around for some time. But the main issue that we are facing is lack of knowledge. And in response to your previous question, like I said, capacity building is lacking, So what we have done, and thank you for mentioning our collaborative network that we've established in Pakistan. There are 5 partners within that collaborative network. So we have the Brown Network, we have the Hermes Net, we have Cognition Hub, we have Mindworks International, then we have IFRS Lab as well as part of that consortium. So the whole idea behind that consortium is that we will establish and we will deliver a series of webinars since September of last year. This will carry on into the new year as well, whereby we will target various different sectors, whereby we will invite various different speakers, and some of those sessions we've had regulators as well. Like I said, I mentioned previously, regulators like SECP, they have been coming in as well, as guest speakers within those webinars. Now, the $1 million question is that, 5 different organizations have come together and they are delivering webinars free of cost. They're inviting speakers to join and talk about ESG. The question is why? And the answer is that the idea behind it is that we want to educate the masses. So not an ideal situation that come to a webinar and learn all about ESG. No, you cannot learn all about ESG in that webinar, but the basics of it within your sector, from the compliance perspective, from the software perspective. Like I said, the 5 partners, all 5 partners are are in different lines of businesses.
Yeah.
Okay. So, for example, HermesNet, if you talk about it, they provide software solutions. If you talk about the Brown Network, they are more about women empowerment. That falls under the social aspect of this ESG. Then you talk about Mindworks International. They are about education and empowerment of women as well. So that falls under the social part of that ESG. Then if you talk about the Cognition Hub, they are more about the education, the auditing, the compliance. That falls under the governance part of it. And then we have the IFRS Lab that encompasses and encapsulates the whole of ESG. So all of these businesses have come together and they are trying to educate the masses. Now, another thing which has come out of this collaboration is delivering on ESG training. Okay, so we have now collaborated with, it's still sort of not set in stone yet, and I can't disclose a lot of information about it due to the legalities, but we are developing a system within this platform whereby hopefully by the first quarter of next year we will be able to deliver ESG trainings as well. So it's a huge achievement, and like I said, it gives me a lot of pride and happiness when I see the regulator SECP doing all that they are doing. If you are the listeners, if you haven't followed the SECP LinkedIn page, I suggest that you go and start following that, because there is so much information that they are delivering on daily basis. Is absolutely phenomenal. So thank you, SECP. Now, coming back to this question that you asked about various different regulations. So GRI is there, SASB is there, and in different countries there is not one set standard that we have to follow. So it is all down to client that we have to work with. So we are working with a client in Oman. They want us to follow GRI. So that is what we are doing. Okay. There is a client in UAE. They want us to follow SASB. So we are following whatever the client's requirement is. And at this point in time, it gives us flexibility. However, once the compliance is mandatory, I think that is when the regulator is going to kick in and they will say, okay, fine, you have a choice of such and such the standards, and that is what you need to deliver by.
The way you just represented the synergy between different platforms and organizations, and that is something, again, like it itself is one of the example of ESG in terms of covering or disseminating information, knowledge, and bringing in sector specific experts to share their from listening from the horse's mouth sort of thing. And definitely it is definitely going to, and it has impacted a lot, because knowledge sharing of best practices and things like that. So all these things definitely brings out another question in my mind, and like in all other countries, again, only regulations, bringing in regulations is something it's not enough. So there are different stakeholders in the value chain which have to play their role, be it standardization bodies, be it organizations like you who are working over there. So so my question next would be how from your platform or this consortium, you can say will be looking into exploring different facilitations or initiatives, government, how to be part of those government initiatives. Are there currently any initiatives governed by the governments in GCC countries or European countries to not only sensitize the the industries or those which have to comply with for the reporting, but also the technical hand, the consulting side, the professionals which are required to make these things happen actually on ground. The ESG reporting making it a reality. So because it's not the gun, it's the man behind the gun at the end of the day. So in order to develop those critical mass, how do you think first, are there any global initiatives or government regulations or government initiatives in other countries, or if not, across Pakistan or in Pakistan, or how you are what your proposal would be to government of Pakistan or SCCP and others who are going to look into, and how your platform can facilitate them or supplement their interventions, so that any critical mass which is trained on ESG stuff in Pakistan, he is equally acceptable he or she should be equally acceptable in other parts of the world as well. So how you can those initiatives can bring coherence across the globe? So these are 2 or 3 different set of questions I just clubbed together for you.
No, absolutely fine. So I'll respond in that manner. So in terms of the deliverance of ESG, it can only be achieved, if and when the masses are trained, and not just trained to be ESG auditors, but in order for you to understand, how ESG can affect a business, and not just a large corporation or a limited company or an LLC or a group of companies, but on any level that we look at, how it will affect. So that is one thing. Second thing that we need to look at is that you asked, how we can help, SCCP or the the government in terms of ESG. My message is very simple and clear. Number one, we need to educate people on what E, S, and G stands for. Because, in the last, I think, 30 days, I have attended about 6 various different ESG conferences and events. Okay. And the business owners who I have met during those conferences or those sessions, they've said, ESG is going to be another huge checklist, and it is going to be an audit, and you'll come and task us to spend more money on the business, whereby, why do we need to reinvent the wheel? Now, my message to those individuals and those business owners is that, if you have a car, okay, and you're driving on the motorway, and that wheel, the tire of that vehicle, is burst. Okay, so what would you do? Would you keep driving that car? No, you wouldn't. You would pull over and you will change the tire. So conversely, the system that we are working in is no longer acceptable or is no longer coherent with when the ESG is implemented. So they need to understand what ESG is. So that is where I am suggesting that we should educate people. Number 3, in relation to what you have asked about, the GCC countries or other international countries, what is the significance of ESG in those countries? So I have mentioned Bahrain, I have mentioned Oman, so those 2 countries, their ESG reporting is mandatory. Okay, they have different scales in relation to the turnover and in relation to the number of employees that they have, but it is mandatory. So those are the 2 countries in there. Now let's talk about UAE. In UAE, it's not mandatory yet, but the ESG temperature is simmering. It's not boiling yet, but it is simmering. So that means that the country is getting ready to get to grips with ESG. So, there are a lot of businesses who are inquiring about the auditing. There are a lot of businesses who are inquiring about trainings. There are a lot of businesses who are inquiring about, how they can comply their business in terms of ESG. Again, ESG, although it's a very complex situation, however, we won't know until we dive into it. Okay, so there are a lot of various different the word I'm looking for is various different hand holdings available in the GCC countries, in terms of compliance, in terms of auditing, and so on and so forth. For example, we do a free health check with your business. We offer a 30-minute health check. We ask you basic question in relation to ESG. We have a software that, gives you a basic standard, audit report, when you answer certain questions. And then, if you like the look and the feel of that audit, that is when you say, okay, fine, let's look into deep dive into it and see how things move forward. From the government perspective, there is a lot of hand holding available. There are various different free training courses. There are open universities that are offering those training courses, and so on and so forth. So yes, there is a lot to be done, but there is a lot of momentum that is gathering. Like I said, the simmering is happening at this point
across the region.
Yes,
yeah, definitely. So definitely, it's like it might be eye-opening for most of our listeners as well, who because it's not the issue of Pakistan, it's a sort of global term and global requirement as well, that is there. The job opportunities are there for youth, and especially in Pakistan, a lot of environmentalists and other people belonging to different backgrounds are looking into like getting the certifications for GRA and others as well. So it now then brings us to the thing like, are there any sort of notable interventions in terms of innovation or in terms of like hardware or software tools which people can look into, and organizations or your platform is looking into, and that is something like digitalization aspect, because mostly, like as you yourself mentioned, that it's like not the typical checklist now. It's something like where you need to deploy resources and involve all the stakeholders at the end of the day, because they enhance transparency frameworks and things like that. Ultimately, it's going to be looked into by the regulator in your respective countries, whether you are false reporting or things like that. So what is the role of innovative tools in context of ESG compliance, so that nothing is left behind in terms of compliance, and it also gives the guidance to the implementer at the end of the day? Are there any sort of innovative tools, or are business as usual techniques and technologies people are relying on?
So like you rightly said, in terms of the tools, the intervention in that aspect, we are working with HermesNet, that like I said, they are part of our consortium. They provide ESG software and the reporting side of it. Then we are working with another Italian company based out of UAE, which is called ESGO. They provide software solutions, and we work in collaboration with them. We have worked with, on 3 different projects. We have had collaboration with ESGO, and there is a new project that is starting soon. We are collaborating with HermesNet. So the whole idea is that we get rid of the Excel sheets and the Word documents and the printouts and checklists and so on and so forth. So these are quite complex and in-depth softwares, because at the end of the day, you have to, when you're doing an ESG audit, you have to understand two things. So, once we are auditing, there's a checklist, we are saying yes, no, maybe kind of situation, or we'll come back to it. However, what the client is interested in to see the end result, which is in terms of the report, because whoever the regulator is in whichever country, they want to see the reports. They're not interested in that checklist. So we need to compile that checklist. However, the end product is going to be that report. Okay. So that report is only available through platforms like HermesNet or ESGO that I'm talking about. So that is available there. Then we come into the latest, modernization of those softwares. There are AI based report generation. There is APIs that we can plug in, into that software that basically, not 100%, but I think about 30 to 40% those AI tools can do the work of an ESG auditor. So those are available in the market, but they are still in their infancy stage, because it's like any other business, supply and demand. So at this point in time, the tech businesses have come forward. They have developed those softwares. They have developed the technology, and they've said, okay, fine, it's out there in the market for you to purchase. Okay. Now, the refinement, the finesse is going to come in when, there are buyers. So once there is a market developed for it, at that point in time, those tech companies are going to start investing into business. So if I take you back to Google in 2000, the Google search engine I'm talking about, a lot of people may not remember Ask Jeeves. Ask Jeeves used to be a search engine. They could not keep up with the technology, and they are nowhere to be. I don't know what fate they met, but if you look at Google, their web page and everything else was totally different to how it is in 2024. So it is because, Google started AdWords, keywords, Google advertisement. There's so many different aspects that Google is charging. So once a revenue stream was generated, at that point in time, they started investing in the business. So conversely, the same thing is going to happen within this sector in terms of the automation, in terms of the AI, the tools, the softwares, and so on and so forth. Once there is market development, that is when these businesses are going to start investing into the technology.
Okay, Usman sir, like we are having a very good discussion, and devil lies in the details sort of thing. We have to probe all those things as well, and the listeners they definitely want to know, to them, most of them, ESG is something that is only attributed towards software sort of thing, but is it only software oriented, or are there any hardware tools and tackles associated with those things as well?
No, it is not just associated with the software side of things. There is hardware as well, which becomes part of it. So if I take you back in time, a few years ago, when we were aggressively doing energy auditing, so we would use tools like flue analyzer, acoustic sound checks, and things like that. So conversely, within the ESG environment, we have to use similar sort of equipment. We have a company called Global Tech Innovations who specialize in these hardware tools, tools like flue analyzers, gas analyzers, which are critical in the completion of the ESG audit. So Global Tech Innovation, they basically are looking into provide rental services for this equipment, because if you were to look at purchasing that equipment, you'd be looking at a huge outlay, as an SME, it will become an affordability issue. So there are more firms out there like Global Tech, who are providing rental services. But like I said, in response to your question, the ESG compliance and auditing is not only related to software. There is hardware element involved. There is an element of human intervention as well. You have to physically visit site. You have to look at their utility bills. You have to look at the HR infrastructure. You have to look at what sort of mode of transport is being used. The car parking spaces, people who are working from home. So there's a whole huge aspect of elements that need to be incorporated within the audit. And like I said, ESG is, the E is the environment and the social part, and then there is the governance part, so there are different elements involved in there.
Yeah, so like again, further adding to like the last two terminologies, Usman Sahab, once we look into this G side, of this acronym, the governance side. So do you think like the governance, the higher ups in Pakistan are basically ready to go for its compliance, or what their expectations would be? Because like until and unless they are not getting any profit out of any venture, the entrepreneurs over here like might be hesitant to go for like the compliance aspect. So what's the selling point for those to address that governance aspect and motivate them to really go for it?
So, being from the energy sector, and within the energy sector, the energy efficiency side of things, I have a very simple analogy, what motivates me to get out of bed every single morning. Yes, we all have bills to pay, families to feed, mortgages to pay, or loans and rents to pay, depending on where we are living. But our ultimate motivation is not money. Okay, so being the professionals that we are and the profession that we belong to within the energy sector, the motivation needs to be providing a better living planet for our future generations. Okay, and that starts with educating the masses that look, we have lived half of our lives. You and I, we've lived half of our lives,
Exactly.
So we've seen, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and now this sort of segment. But the future generations, the children of today, the Gen Z as they call themselves, or we call them, what lies ahead for them? So if we leave the planet in the state it is today, and if we don't take the precautionary measures, this is not going to be a habitable space for the future generation.
Okay.
So monetary value and everything else is coupled with it. But for me personally, the motivation is that, we do something for the future generations. That is why, the governments are always going to target the larger corporations, who can make a bigger impact, on this planet. So I think that is where our, the mental framework needs to be, not just coupled with the monetary value, but also what we are going to leave for the future generation.
Okay, so that's an interesting aspect. And when we talk about generation, just like the present minister for the advisor to Prime Minister on climate change, in fact, she mentions that like our youth is basically the present and our children are basically the future. So we need to also bring them in loop. And definitely, you rightly said that every segment of our society, we owe them some good interventions and bringing. And now I like to know from your opinion, like since the Ministry of Climate Change is also going to revise their NDC, so how this ESG could be embedded into their upcoming revision of NDC 3.0, and how this consortium can facilitate or supplement their efforts in adding that, and in the upcoming revision, which is expected to be submitted by the government of Pakistan.
Thank you very much, Asad Sahab. This is a very important, question that you have brought up in this conversation about NDC. So, as you know, in the NDC 2021, there is no mention about ESG as such. So there is an upcoming revision of NDC 3.0. Which is in the pipeline, So this is a very good time. And again, I would like to bring SECP into the situation, and the Ministry of
Climate change,
into the picture, that this is the time where, all the stakeholders need to come on the table, and ensure that ESG becomes part of the NDC 3.0. In relation to our platform and our consortium, we are more than happy and willing to educate the stakeholders, and spread the knowledge in terms of ESG, what it entails, and we can even help SECP or the ministry, in terms of, putting a consultation out there on behalf of these institutions. From our platform, from our consortium, through our consortium, consultation as to what this NDC 3.0 should entail in relation to ESG. Because look, the ledger books are not written every single day. Okay, legislative books are not written every single day. Once we are at a stage where the legislative exercise is being rewritten, this is the best time that we incorporate ESG into NDC 3.0. And like I said, being one of the biggest advocates of ESG, I'm sure, our partners that I mentioned previously, would be willing to work with us in terms of, delivering that education and, sort of spreading the word on ESG in conjunction with SCCP and the ministry.
That's great. And now, again, a very pertinent point that came in my mind, like when we talk about like constitutional or governance aspects in Pakistan, like we have like Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination at the federal level. Then like there have been like now after 18th Amendment, like the provinces also are playing their role in that context. So do you think like the environmental protection departments or EPA and climate change departments in Punjab and other provinces, they also have some role to play in it, because they have the environmental quality standards that have to be complied with, or some are revising their standards as well to come in like to further bring stringent regulations or compliance aspects. So how do you like foresee their role, and the consortium part, apart from like what's happening on the legislative side, but on the practicing or shop floor level, they are the ones like who are like who have to look into aspect apart from Pak EPA, like in provinces, they also have some role to play in it. So how do you see that role coming up?
Yeah, so you mentioned about EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. They have a key role to play in this, because once we talk about carbon emissions and the offsetting and the efficiency side of things as far as ESG is concerned, yes, they have a bigger role to play. But what needs to happen really on, 18th Amendment, provinces, and the federal level and the provincial level, fine, as far as the classroom is concerned, they are there. But what we need to do is we need to look beyond that. We need to look at it as Pakistan, as our country. And we need to focus on how we can drive ESG within Pakistan. So the day all the stakeholders, have that mentality, and it needs to be driven from top to bottom. So if it means that federal government plays its own role, the federal agency plays its own role, SCCP as a regulator plays its own role, it needs to be trickled down to the provincial level. Those targets need to be, once ESG compliance becomes mandatory, as and when the regulator feels, it needs to be trickled down. But you need to understand that in order for provinces or those local agencies to deliver ESG, you need to give them the tools that they require. Okay, and what are those tools? The tools are, first of all, education on ESG. And during the course of this podcast, the listeners may have come across this word training and education from my mouth probably 50 times. But that is the order of the day. Because if you look around you, within our networks, within our social networks, as far as ESG is concerned, how many ESG auditors do you actually know? How many ESG auditors are actually there? Is there a platform that is managing those ESG auditors or managers and so on and so forth kind of situation? I mean, what is the criteria that we will say, okay, fine, that you have got yourself certified or qualified from a certain institute? Who is to set that? Although we have all these standards available, like I said, GRI, SASB, and so on, but there needs to be a framework within the country, that needs to govern all this. And like I said, these local agencies, the provincial agencies, yes, they have a bigger role to play, but it needs to be trickled down from the federal level, from the regulators' point of view. They need to bring everyone together. And your previous question related to NDC 3.0, it's a great time for all the parties to come together. We have a common goal, and that common goal should be inclusion of ESG within NDC 3.0. So
that's the bottom line from your end. But definitely you have described the things very loud and clear, that it's the role, a top-down approach which has to be taken. So we are also going towards the end of this podcast, but nevertheless, one of the very critical question that might be in the mind of the listeners as well and viewers, that so I definitely would like to ask that, because even though for all the certifications, to get certifications, individual certifications, there are cost elements attributed towards that, and forex is involved as well in most of those if you go for international certifications. So in context of this ESG reporting, what are the cost implications that is it free of cost thing which everybody is talking about, or is there any money attributed towards this ESG reporting?
It is certainly not free of cost. Okay, but before I get into the financial aspect of it, I would like to tell the viewers that this is a series of podcast, so within that series of podcast, this is the very first podcast that we are recording. So in order for us to disclose the cost or the financial mechanism associated with it, the listeners need to stay tuned, and they need to come into the second podcast where we will discuss the costing element of it. So until then, stay tuned, and the listeners, and Asad Saab, thank you very much for your time and putting this conversation through the paces and asking some valuable questions. And I hope I have been able to answer the questions in a satisfactory manner. Thank you for your time. Viewers, listeners, thank you for your time.
Yeah, and thank you so much from my side as well. It has been a 1 hour discussion, and we could have continued for so many hours, but I think in order to retain the information which our eminent expert, Mr. Osman Masood, which we have over here today, he just shared his practical knowledge with you guys. Hopefully it is going to benefit many of you. And then again, our anxiety is at peak, and we shall be definitely looking towards the next podcast where we are going to explore into the financial aspects of ESG reporting, and that what are the numbers which industries over here can, or the professionals in the market can look into, whether it's a profitable business from the consulting side, or it's something which is beyond the reach of normal SMEs, and what could be the role of financing institutions or government bodies to make it acceptable and economical. So there's different models we are going to discuss in our next podcast. So again, as Mr. Osman Masood said, that you have to stay tuned, and that's what I'm also reiterating, and that's the bottom line from my side. Thank you very much.